Okay, hi brothers and sisters. I hope it's recording. I did a couple tests and they turned out okay, so hopefully this one will too. Hopefully it'll pick up my voice without too much, interference. So today we're going to look at something. I know I'm supposed to be done, but I haven't even begun my research on the house in the forest of Lebanon and all I wanted it to entail. There you go. For part 7 of Unlocking the Mysteries of the Bible with the Key David. But this is kind of part and parcel of it. Of course, everything I do is. But before we share what I wanted to look at this evening, and forgive me for being so late on my final part. I do plan on being done, but I thought I'd share with you what I had been looking at. And but before we do that, let's take a look at one other thing I wanted to take a quick look at. And that is found in Isaiah. And yep, I'm going to use my new computer and see how that actually works out. So it's found in Isaiah 57:17. And this is what, and I'm going to say she says, I was enraged by their sinful greed. I punished them. And then she says, I hid my face in anger. So we're going to take a look at hid and what that kind of entails, and we'll do it quickly. I punished them and hid my face in anger, yet they kept on in their willful ways. Now, if we do go into interlinear, now it says, I was enraged by his sinful greed, so I struck him and hid my face in anger. Yet he kept turning back to the desires of his heart. But she says, yet I have seen his ways, but I will heal him, and I will guide him and restore comfort to him and his mourners. So the mourners we picked up in Jeremiah chapter 9, which is the women who were mourning for the houses that had cast them out, all right? So if you have been watching my videos, we already know this. We don't need to go in any more detail. But yeah, for the iniquity of his covetousness. So if you go in 12:15, gains made by violence and unjust gain and profit. So these were the daughters that were being gnashed upon. Great violence were being perpetuated against them to remove their covenant, their laws out of the land. And their law flowed like a living water from Lebanon, the house in the forest of Lebanon, which is what our final video is supposed to be. That's going to cap off the end. And why I'm a little bit laggy, I have not been able to get into it yet. And I wanted to definitely do a little bit of extra research on Tyre. Now, what I have understood is that Tyre was situated supposedly in the land of Asher, the tribe of Asher. That much I have come to understand. But anyway, but this goes back to what was going on, all right? And she was very angry with what the men of her covenant were doing to her covenant and what they were doing to gain power and riches, and they were using violence. So that's this word covetousness, for the iniquity of his covenants, of his covetousness. Gain made by violence, unjust gain, and profit. And that's going to take us to Adam, who built himself up with thick clay. That means under the law, using lies, religious lies, and laws to gain himself power, whether it be physical, because there is some indication in Job 30, and I wanted to read that chapter perhaps on the tail end of this, if I get the chance, that does indicate that to build yourself up under a law that creates an imbalance actually leads to a physical empowerment of the body as well. That seems to be indicated in Job 30. But anyway, so it's dishonest gain here. It's plunder, covetousness, gain, lucre. We see Nimrod doing this. He was hunting the righteous out of the land is what he was doing. And the beginning of his kingdom, of course was Babylon. So we see him building up the harlot spirit that over time would bow to the religious lies of mankind, who wanted to yoke his sister, put a law on her neck, which we know he's done. All you got to do is take a look around you. And who hid her face? Well, we know who hid her face. And the elect would be akin to these hidden ones. This hid. I hid my face in anger. Now we see the same Lord whose face is hid. Why they can make it a masculine? Because she hid her face from them. But she's the same Lord that sits to the right hand in Psalm 110 of the number 113. And it says, in her wrath, she will strike through kings in the day of her wrath. It says him. But it's her that hid her face. Her who? Who hid her face? Psalm 83. It says, for lo, the enemy have made a tumult, and they have hated, and they that hate thee have lifted up the head. They have taken crafty counsel against thy people, and consulted against thy hidden ones, against your treasured ones. Well, we're going to discover where those treasured ones come from. We already have, actually. They're the elect. They're the first fruits. They're a divine selection. But we also find out, what we're going to find out when we do a study in Psalm 68 and Psalm 69, that it's actually their descendant, the descendancy of her as well. So we see them taking crafty counsel against her people and against her hidden ones. So here she hid her face. We know the Lord, in Isaiah 56:8 says, the Lord, 136, gathereth the outcast, that would be the hidden ones, of Israel, yet will I gather others to her beside those who are gathered unto her. So her hidden ones is the remnant daughters of Israel, which is the elect at the end of days, which is the first fruits born out of the dust of the earth, speaking her covenant, which is also identified in the last verse of Psalm 69 as an actual descendancy that comes from her. And we know it's Israel here called the hidden ones. It's Israel who hid her face, the feminine, from the men who no longer wanted her in covenant. This is what we've been discovering. Verse 4, they have said, come and let us cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel may be no more in remembrance. So you see who they were after. They were after against Israel. Israel is identified as a heifer that's burned to ashes. Okay, now, here we go. We're going to start in Psalm 68, and I'm going to ask you some questions. And maybe you already know the answers. I'm still researching. This has always been a learning expedition for me. I go on a learning expedition every time I go into the scriptures. So I don't always go in thinking I have the answer 100%. It's a real matter for me of building the knowledge that I need, that he eventually is going to lead me to the real rounded out truth of the whole thing. So why I may have studied Bashan in the past, and we looked at it as being the land of Haran, Wikipedia, there's still so much more to be discovered. And so I continued on looking at Psalm 68. So this is what it says. Okay, so let's go through Psalm 68 right quick. I don't know that I have a whole lot of time. But we're going to start. And we're going to see what we can discover in these two chapters when we put our thinking caps on, like our teachers used to tell us in school. My teachers in various classes would say, let's put our thinking caps on and start to think about this. And that doesn't mean go into religious theology that's been developed by men who's those little crafty foxes on the pulpit who's not about to go in and look and really study the words to discover something that's going to maybe take away from the triple male Godhead that tickles their ears. I'm sorry, I'm going to stop there. So, Psalm 68, this says, may God arise, may her, it says his, we're going to say her enemies be scattered, and may her foes flee before her. May you blow them away like smoke, as wax melts before the fire, and may the wicked perish before God. But may the righteous be glad and rejoice before God, and may they be happy and joyful. Okay? Sing to God, sing in praise of her name, extol her who rides on the clouds, and rejoice before her. Her name is the Lord. And it's not a father to the fatherless. That's all we have. All right? We don't have a mother. She is a mother to the motherless. And what it means to be motherless, it means to have no mother in the heavens identified. That's who hid her face from us. She's mad at us. Why is she mad at us? Because we turned away from her covenant. Not his, hers. That's why the vineyard becomes his. Because they begin to teach a lying religious theology, okay? And for anybody who's followed me on the other videos that I've made, I don't have to explain all about the Shulamite, okay? I've done it over and over again. So she's a mother to the motherless, to those of us who looks to the heavens and says, look, you say we are without excuse not to understand the Godhead. You manifested it. So when I look in the mirror, I see an image that God made in God's image, and it is not male. My image happens to be female. I am made in my mother's image. And my body as such is defined as the one that gives life on this planet. Therefore, the image that I am made in as the creator of life above is female. That's what it's telling you. And it's also telling you that you're without excuse not to understand that. It's just simple, common sense. You think a he gave life. Why do you think those foxes on the pulpit don't want to go in and study the scriptures? They're afraid it's not going to tickle. It's not going to be like honey on their tongue. But it will do one thing. It will deliver you into eternal life, the truth. And but she says to those lying foxes, those men of Baal who began to prophesy in a father's name, she says, don't worry, you'll be no burden to me. I won't deliver you. You're not my children. You want to teach against a mother that gives life, then you're no children of mine. You can walk that crooked path that those foxes laid out for you so long ago. If you don't want to follow the straight way that I tell you is my way in Proverbs 1, which is my laws that give eternal life. They don't raise a man up and say, bow to him. That's not what my laws do. And that's found in Proverbs 1. And the father was to point to the mother and say, you adhere to her laws. But they didn't. They didn't want anything to do with her covenant. Her laws of peace and mercy and truth that leads to eternal life, they didn't want them. So she hid her face and her hidden ones, which is her descendancy hidden upon planet Earth, no longer hid, because she says, my glory, you'll see it upon this earth. And she says, those who tries to, what does she say? It is found in Isaiah 8:10. Those who take counsel together, it shall come to naught. They speak the word, and it shall not stand, for God is with us. So you see them trying to do that against their hidden ones, God's hidden ones, which is the remnant daughters of Israel. You see them trying to take crafty counsel right now to remove them out of the land of being a nation, which you saw the men of Israel doing actually in Obadiah 1. We'll just go there briefly before we move on here. Obadiah. I'm well back. So Obadiah 1. Obadiah's back. Okay. So what did they say? She says, thou shouldest not have entered into the gate of my people in the day of their calamity. Yea, thou shouldest not have looked on their affliction in the day of their calamity, nor have laid hands on their substance in the day of their calamity. Neither shouldest thou have stood in the crossway to cut off those of her that did escape. Neither shouldest thou have delivered up those of hers that did remain in the day of distress. And she's talking about the men who delighted, I'm just looking for the verse. Verse 12, but thou shouldest not have looked on the day of thy sister, not brother, in the day that she became a stranger unto you. They didn't want anything to do with her covenant, daughter Zion's covenant. Neither shouldest thou have rejoiced over the children of Judah in the day of their destruction. Neither shouldest thou have spoken proudly in the day of their distress. So they were removing the righteous daughters actually out of the land that have, you believe, sons in Judah. But it's the women that they were removing. They did not want them in covenant, right? And they even went so far as to try to cut them off from leaving. And they stole their goods out of their houses where they met with God. Psalm 74 tells us what they did to their houses. They were as men wielding axes in a forest. Those houses that they were tearing down is going to actually lead us into our study here on Bashan. Is actually where we're going to look at, like I said before. Now, sorry if I keep repeating myself. So it gets to be confusing. And this is the reason why it's so confusing right now for me. All right. So this is the question and the study that I'm going to hand off to you. So we'll keep going until we actually hit it. God sets the lonely in families. She leads out the God he. No, she. She leads out the prisoners with singing. Who's been imprisoned? The daughters. That's who's been imprisoned under a religious lie. They play the harlot, they do, under this religious lie. But mothers, daughters at the end spring up out of the dust of the earth, speaking no guile. They're actually holding the original spirit of the covenant of Israel as the roots. It says if the roots is holy, the branch is also holy. So it's speaking of the descendancy of these daughters coming from that root, which we're going to show you it actually says so in the scriptures. She leads out the prisoners with singing, but the rebellious live in a sun-scorched land, in a desert where there is no water. When you, God, went out before your people, when you marched through the desert, right? Wilderness, it's the same, desert. The earth shook, the heavens poured down rain before God, the one of Sinai before God, the God of Israel. So let's go back into the King James. I like the King James. It's prettier. It's got a prettier lilt to it. The earth shook, the heavens also dropped at the presence of God. Even Sinai itself was moved at the presence of God, the God of Israel. Look at that. Let's write down, for anybody who's actually still interested in doing a study, let's write down Sinai. Okay. We can put remember at the top here. Excuse me. So remember Sinai. Okay, even Sinai itself was moved at the presence of God. So we've identified the presence of God as the outcast Zion that no man sought a covenant with, also identified as the camp of Mahanaim that Jacob saw in his dreams, I guess, though he battled with this angel, which is supposedly a male. No, it was the daughter Zion herself. He was after her blessing of the birthright is what he was after. And so he battles until daylight with her, and then the angel leaves. She leaves. Daughter Zion leaves, which is the Lord, 136, I believe, that he's battling with to take her name, which was Israel. All right? Israel is identified as a heifer that eventually gets burned to ashes, which we're going to see here in this chapter in a minute. And so, but what happens? He ends up carrying this limp out of this dream right with him. If he was actually battling this angel in the spiritual plane, as it suggests that he was, the injury that he sustained by this angel, and I don't think it was in the spirit realm that he dreamed. I think he actually battled her in the physical plane. But it supposedly followed him out into the physical plane of existence, and he walked with a limp after that. If I got that right. I might have to research that again. So, there's something weird going on. Because they actually walked on this earth. This group of women, known as the outcast of Zion, that no man sought a covenant with, known as the presence of God, physically existed in this physical realm, physical spiritual realm on this earth. All right? They actually did. And this chapter actually proves it. Because it says, okay, so remember, the God here was in Sinai. This God's going to be identified as the Lord 136, which we identified as daughter Zion's number, which is in Psalm 110. Now, Psalm 110 lists 3 different lords there. We know they're 3 and separate, distinct lords because of the chapter in Genesis. Oh, what chapter is it? 18? The same 3 lords identified in Psalm 110 are identified in Genesis 18 as 3 angels that Abraham actually speaks to. And he sees 3 standing. And it's the same 3 numbers in Psalm 110. So we know that 3068 we've identified as Mother God's number, Mother Almighty. You can even say the roots. You can even say she's the roots of the tree. The middle number is 113. Now that would be Christ, Joshua's number, who you'll also discover things about in Zechariah chapter 3. We've talked about that. He's given a new garment, a new body. And then we see 136, the Lord to his right hand, who actually comes from the roots of that tree and is the branch, 136. And she will strike through kings in the day of her wrath. Why might that be? Well, she hid her face in wrath because they didn't want her in covenant. Cast off her daughters, who she indwelt with her spirit, with the spirit of her covenant. They didn't want anything to do with it. They wanted to build up a harlot that would teach man as God. Why do you think those sneaky little foxes on the pulpit that loves to go, he, won't go in and study the words? That's real study. They just want to read what's already written there. And yet God says, every time a woman sits in front of a mirror and says there's no such thing as a female God, you're actually calling God a liar. That's what you're calling God. And God says you're without excuse not to understand the Godhead. I manifested it in this creation. You do not see male walking around and a male giving life. You see male and female. And that was the creation in the garden. The problem with the account in the garden is they begin with making woman under man. No. Man took her. That was the last thing created, representing the glory on top. Rejected a covenant with her and just said, you're going to play my harlot. And you're going to build me up as the one that rules over the kingdom. That's what happened. The woman is identified as the last thing created, and as the last thing created, she is the firstborn of the kingdom. She come from the very beginning, from the roots, her mother Israel, and she is the branches at the top, also identified as the capstone in Zechariah chapter 4, that grew into a mountain after smashing the image, the toes on that false image of a king in Daniel chapter 2, and it tells you she grows into a mountain in the earth. And God says to Israel, virgin Israel, I will build you again. And she is the epitome of God at the very top, and the one that God chooses to rule through. And she says to her in Micah chapter 4, the dominion will be restored back to daughter Zion. So here, thou, O God, didst send a plentiful rain, whereby thou didst confirm thine inheritance when it was weary. Job says in Job 30, 1 and 2, I made a covenant with mine eyes. Why then should I think upon a maid? For what portion of God is there from above? The inheritance, how does he say it? I'll go. So we get this right. He's telling you. But nobody wants to put it together. Job 30. Job 30. No, it's 31. I always get them two chapters twisted around. 31, 1 and 2. I made a covenant with mine eyes. Why then should I think upon a maid? For what portion of God is there from above? And what inheritance, right, of the Almighty from on high? She's talking about her daughters of Zion, which is exactly what Job is talking about. And she says it here. Thou, O God, did send a plentiful rain, water, dew, your doctrine, whereby thou did confirm thine inheritance, the daughters of Zion, when it was weary. Thy congregation has dwelt therein, thou, O God, has prepared of thy goodness for the poor. Who was the poor of the congregation, or who was the poor of the flock? The women. The women. We've identified that. Zechariah 11, 7 and 8, when she breaks her staff, symbolizing a breaking of the covenant. The poor of the flock watched and knew it was from God. And the poor of the flock would be the daughters of Zion, who were fighting to keep the covenant in play. That's what they were doing. Which then also leads you to Joseph's blessings, because the queen, identified as Ephraim, the firstborn of Mother God's womb. Yes, it's a female. That's why she is the last thing created, but she came from the beginning. The rejected stone who no man sought a covenant with. And so God sends this word, this water, this rain, to confirm her inheritance with these daughters of Zion, because they are growing weary. Thy congregation has dwelt therein. Thou, O God, has prepared of thy goodness for the poor. Now, congregation here we've identified as a female congregation. This is very important for anybody who does actually study words and looks for the truth. The Lord gave the word. Now, the Lord here is 136. That's her number. Daughter Zion, the branch number. The spirit of his covenants, number 136. That's why she's going to strike through kings in the day of her wrath, and they're going to pick their head up. That's what it means, to be restored back to your covenant. The Lord gave the word. Great was the company of those that published it. Not of those women. A great company of women. Where did these company of women meet? This congregation meet? Let me say. Well, it's not on this one. Never is it? I'll get it. Right there. So, Isaiah 14, what does it say? Verse 13. For thou hast said in thine heart. Okay, Isaiah 14, verse 13. This is where the congregation met. So let's remember this, where they met. We'll write it down to remember as a detail. What did I do with my pen? For thou hast said in thine heart, I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will sit also upon the, what? Mount of the congregation. We just identified a congregation of women publishing a word. The mount of congregation, where? In the sides of the south? No. Of the west? No. Of the east? No. Of the north. The north. Oh, when I think of the north, I often think of Israel, the north kingdom, the 10 tribes of Israel. I don't think of Judah when it says the north. I don't. And that's what it's identifying here for you. If you're clever enough to take the little puzzle pieces that they've been kind enough to give to us, though they've truly distorted it by throwing a man-made religious lie and theology in there for thousands of years and written book after book after book after book to build it up. And then a law that yokes us and causes us to be under him, and then a teaching that debases us. So they've really worked at gnashing at our covenant and taking the spirit of our covenant out of the land. And yet she is promised full restoration. And the men of Judah as well, who took wives of a strange God. That would mean the covenant, the law system of a strange God, whom the mothers and fathers of Israel never feared, and married her and dealt unfaithfully and treacherously with the wife of their youth, yet is she the wife of your covenant. So God is saying she will be fully restored back to the covenant, and her laws will rule the kingdom. I've promised it to daughter Zion. Though you gnashed at her, you accused her falsely, you brought false witnesses against her that gnashed upon her with their teeth. You pierced her. That's in Psalm 22. We already looked at this one. If I can locate it. I did have it pulled up here. Psalm 22. And it's about the doe of the morning. The doe is not a deer, a female deer. The doe is the ibex, a she-goat, which is in the Abrahamic covenant in Genesis 15:9. The heifer would represent this group of daughters, actually the daughters of Zion, this village of women in Psalm 68 that we're going to read further about because it's going to give us more detail. But in Psalm 22, to the tune of the doe of the morning, right? And she says, why have you forsaken me, right? And we're going to understand what took place. She cries out, yet you are enthroned as the Holy One. You are the one Israel praises. And that was the daughter of Zion, the spirit daughter Zion, known as Lord 136. That was her number. And these daughters were her inheritance. And then it lists her as the Almighty, the Creator. That's what she is, that gives life. In you, our ancestors put their trust, and they trusted, and you delivered them. To you they cried out, and were saved. In you they trusted, and were not put to shame. But I am a worm, and I'm not a man. I am woman, I am a worm, I'm despised by those who took a harlot in covenant that will willingly build him up as God on this earth and be willingly yoked under a man-made religious lie and law. So I am a worm. It's talking about these daughters of Zion, the remnant daughters of Israel, known as the nation of Israel, whom they wanted to take counsel against the hidden ones and stop her from becoming a nation again. Well, you're only going to become a nation by speaking the truthful word of the covenant and delivering your children. You're not going to wait on a man to do it. Why now do I see every man standing around with his hands on his hips as a woman in travail and every face turned pale? They're witnessing the collapsing of the entire civilization because they are unable to deliver the children. It is only bringing on death and demise. So the sisters, who are the remnant daughters of Israel, who is also an elect. They are an elected group. It means they are divinely appointed. And you were divinely appointed before the foundation of the world because of your descendancy. It is not based on your color. It is based on your descendancy that runs in your blood. Now, to you they cried out and were saved, and you they trusted and were not put to shame. But I am a worm and not a man. I am scorned by everyone and despised by the people. I have become an outcast. They do not want me in covenant. They do not want your laws, O Mother God. And yet I will look to you for my deliverance. All who see me mock me. They hurl insults and they shake their heads. And boy, do they ever. I've heard words that some of the sisters, I ain't even heard what the men are saying. I don't think I want to even know. But I've heard some of the sisters, oh my gosh, there's no such thing as a female God. Well, here, allow me to erase your image, shall we? God made you, and every time you say there's no female God, you call God a liar. You do, not me. I'll put my faith in the Holy One of Israel to deliver me. I ain't gonna put it in a man-made religious lies that's had thousands of years to be built up by a harlot spirit willing to teach it. You go for it, girls. You walk that crooked path and let's see it deliver you. Let's see those men deliver you. Oh, peace, peace, when there is no peace. Oh, but those foxes can sound so righteous, can't they? And us women can sound so wicked, can't we? They don't want to hear anything we have to say. It doesn't do this. And you women, you're idolaters. That's what the Bible calls you. The idolaters are male and female who bows to a religious lies. So, all who see me mock me. They hurl insults, shaking their heads. And I'm sure not just me. I'm sure there are other daughters out there who, like me, feel that they have been selected, they have been appointed by God, Mother, who never forgot her hidden ones. She trusts in the Lord, they say. Well, let her rescue her. We'll see. Let her deliver her, since she delights in her, so they mock. We don't need to actually hear you or watch you write it in a real negative comment to know that this is what is in your heart, to know that this is what is in your minds, and this is what you are saying, this is what you are thinking, this is what you're doing. The world attests to that simple truth. If it didn't attest to it, we would have absolute freedom in this world. We do not. We have bondage, bondage, bondage. That's right. That's what we have by our governments. So, yet you brought me out of the womb. I'm going to change it. Yet you gave life to me, and you made me trust at your breast, my mother. Milk comes from the mother. We grow on the milk of our mother, on the words of our mother. And you get that in Song of Songs. You do. It's not from a king that you get your milk. It's from your queen that you get your milk and your nourishment from. So I was birthed by my mother, and it was at her breast that I was made to trust in her, because she nurtured me and she cared for me with loving words, with truth, with kindness, with the love of a mother that only a mother can give. From birth I was cast on you from my mother's womb. You have been my God. From your womb, mother, you have been my God. Do not be far from me, for trouble is near, and there is no one to help. And boy, there is no one to help. Those who could sit around, on their hands, or they're twiddling their thumbs, their fingers and their thumbs, and they're going, oh, we don't got to do nothing, we just got to have faith. There's absolutely nothing we can do. Peace, peace, when there is no peace. And sudden destruction will come upon them as a woman in travail. That's those same men standing around with their hands on their hips as a woman in travail. They're trying to do something that a man can't do. And they're trying to deliver the children. They're convincing the women that it is the men that will deliver the children, not them. So, hey, peace, peace, girls, when there is no peace. You have healed the hurt of the daughter of my people, slightly saying, peace, peace, when there is no peace. Why now do I see every man standing around with his hands on his hips as a woman in travail, and every face turned pale? Oh, hey, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid when you see everything coming down, everything collapsing, everything failing. Oh, don't fear, because they gotcha. Those foxes on the pulpit preaching peace. Don't worry, a man's going to deliver you. And yet they prophesied through the false imaginations of their hearts and of their mind, their hearts that wanted to rule over you, and their minds that could come up with Oh, it's through Baal that we'll prophesy, through the fathers, through the men, through the husbands, and we'll take those words and we'll prophesy them as truth, that it's a father that will deliver the burden. Yeah. So hey, go for it. It's a father and his children. It's a father, son, and another male called the Holy Spirit that's going to deliver you all, because your image, when God made it as a life-giving image, is a liar. That's right. You can't trust anything out of the Creator's mouth. You have to go to the Bible and man-made theology to get your truth. But whatever you do, don't go in and do the real study, because then you're in real fear. You'll be in real trouble of bringing on the day of the Lord. I.e., I think we have the beginnings of it. Yeah. So somebody's doing their homework. Verse 12. Many bulls surround me. The bulls of who? The bulls of Bashan. Strong bulls of Bashan have encircled me. They encircle her. They open wide their mouth at me as a ravening and a roaring lion. And they did. We saw them taking her out of the land. That's what they wanted. I am poured out like water. All my bones are out of joint. My heart is like wax. It is melted within me. So, there's no female required in this creation. I don't know why God ever made one. I really don't. Because then that actually technically makes God a big fat liar. And I don't believe God lied. I happen to believe the man-made religious lie and theology is a lie. My strength is dried up. You lay me in the dust of death. For dogs, the word here for dogs is male harlots. Male prostitutes have surrounded me. A band of evildoers have encompassed me. They pierced my hands and my feet. You see what they did to her? They were gnashing at her. They were bringing false witnesses against her to take the spirit of her covenant out of the land. She's also identified as your rock that you were to be founded upon. It was her laws, not man's laws. So you see all of this, all right? But this wasn't what I wanted to read. I was just making the point that this is the same group here, the daughters of Zion, who was her inheritance that they worked and gnashed upon, pierced, surrounded her, the bulls of Bashan. That's those men, the males of Israel, the sons of Israel, the north, that actually come against the daughters of Zion to try to remove them out of the land in the spirit of their covenant. And we've discussed this over, so we're going to keep reading here. So this congregation met in the mount of the congregation in the sides of the north. So what does it say? The Lord gave the word. So daughter Zion 136, daughter Zion's name, or number rather, Lord 136, met with her inheritance here on earth, known as the daughters of Zion, this company of women, who would then take the word out. They flowed like a living water from Lebanon, which is where? In the north. Really? It's in the north? Lebanon is in the north. Huh? And then we get a little house called the house in the forest of Lebanon, which was where? Well, let's keep reading and see if we can't figure out a little bit about what's going on here. So verse 12, Psalm 68, kings of armies did flee apace, and she that tarried at home divided the spoil. Though you have lion amongst the pots. No, that's not what it's translated here. When you go in and do your study and look the words up, and you can look them all up, you'll be so pleased if you're really bent on learning truth at what you just might be able to piece together. Though you have lion amongst the ash heaps, yet shall ye be as the wings of a dove. That's female. That's not a male dove. That's female, representing the Holy Spirit, your dove. And she says, and I believe it's the physical spiritual component, these daughters who were in covenant with 136, she says this. All right? She says this in Psalm. Let me see. Let's read 55. The title heading of Psalm 55 is called Betrayed. And I'm going to tell you, this is the daughter Zion that was betrayed in her covenant. The women that her spirit came upon, known as her inheritance, in the beginning called Eve, mother of all living, of life. Verse 1 of 55, give ear to my prayer, O God, and hide not thyself from my supplication. Attend unto me and hear me. I mourn in my complaint, and I make a noise. Because of the voice of the enemy, because of the oppression of the wicked, for they cast iniquity upon me, and in wrath they hated me. She says they hated me without a cause. They had no reason to hate me or my law. My heart is sore pained within me, and the terrors of death have fallen upon me. Fearfulness and trembling are come upon me, and horror hath overwhelmed me. And I said, oh, that I had the wings of a dove, for then would I fly away and be at rest. So she so longed. If this was a male, do you think he'd say of a dove? Don't you think he'd say of a pigeon? Don't we know the difference between a male and a female in certain species, such as the dove and the pigeon? The turtle dove is female. The pigeon is male. So, oh, if I had the wings of a pigeon, I would fly away. This is her. Because he dealt treacherously. He accused her of things that she said, I know not what they're accusing me of. It's a lie. I did not commit what they're accusing me of. These are false witnesses gnashing at me with their teeth to take the spirit of my covenant and law out of the land so they can rule themselves and yoke my inheritance under them. And that's just what we got going on. And I said, oh, that I had the wings like a dove, for then would I fly away. Lo, then would I wander far off and remain in the wilderness. It's strange because when you look up signpost, it'll link you to, what's the word? Now I can't remember. If you look up the word signpost, I doubt I wrote it down. It will take you to the feminine dry ground. It's a feminine dry ground, right? So what it means that the signpost is masculine, leads you to the feminine dry ground, means that they dried up her waters, her law, the spirit of her covenant upon this earth, and put in play their own signs and wonders that were thought up by the wicked imaginings of those men of Baal who taught man, 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 or male, 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 right? Father as God, and who you would hearken to when it was mother's laws and words and waters that we've discussed. Is shown in passages. You were to hearken to her words and her waters, not his. So but what I was saying is, if you look up signpost, which is gonna, I believe, a masculine, it'll eventually lead you back to a feminine dry ground. And that's because their lying signpost, their lying crooked path that you follow now is just because of her dry ground that they dried up and wanted nothing to do with her covenant and worked to take it out of the land. So she would remain in the wilderness. I would hasten my escape from the windy storm and the tempest. Destroy, O Lord, that's 136, who her spirit was upon her. And divide their tongues, for I have seen violence and strife in the city. Aha. It says, Truth staggered and equity could no longer enter into the streets. That's what it states. Because they began to exalt the harlot spirit. And it says, my hosts that could have intervened were restrained. They had to be restrained. Not to intervene on thy behalf. To allow this to go forward. Day and night they go about it upon the walls thereof. Mischief also and sorrow are in the midst. Oh, are they forever in the midst there? Not forever. Wickedness is in the midst thereof. Deceit and guile depart not from her streets. For it was not an enemy that reproached me. It wasn't an enemy. Then I could have maybe saw that coming. I could have had a hope of seeing it coming. But it wasn't an enemy that reproached me. Go to Obadiah 1. Then I could have borne it. I could have carried it. If it hadn't been one of mine enemies. It neither was it he that hated me, that did magnify himself against me. Then I would have hid myself from him. Well, eventually, the Spirit did. She said, I hid in my wrath. And she did. But it was you, a man, mine own equal, that did this to me. That's what she says. So here when you have the dove that's lying among the ash heaps. So we get the heifer Israel, these daughters of Zion in the physical form that was burned to ashes. And then the Lord, 136, the Spirit had to come off of these women. And she promised these same women through the descendancy coming from the root, that they would be the branches in the end, that they would be rebirthed out of the dust of the earth. I hear a familiar spirit as one who speaks my covenant upon her tongue. So the Lord gave the word, and great was the company of women that published it. This congregation met in the north, which is not in the south. That's not in Judah's territory. Neither was Bashan. When the Almighty scattered kings in it, it was white as snow in salmon. That's what it looks like it's saying, salmon. Or Zalmon. It's got Z. The hill of God is as the hill of Bashan, and high hill as the hill of Bashan. So God is saying the hill of God is the hill of Bashan. Do you see Zion in there anywhere? Now, I studied it. The commentary said, of course, it's stating Zion. Well, we're going to look at where Zion may or may not have been, because there's some conflict going on here. For anybody who does deep study. Now, I did this once, but because you have so much going on, you can only focus on certain aspects and you have to let others go. Because if you don't, you're just going to lose sight of the one that you're on, and you're going to end up with a huge mixed up mess. Now, at the time that I did look at this, it gave Bashan as being the land of Haran in Wikipedia. And but here, when I first read it, my first thought was, see, it's showing you that God dwelt in Bashan. The Mount of Bashan was where God chose to dwell. Now, God identified in this chapter is the Lord, 136. And she chose to dwell in the hill of Bashan, a high hill as the hill of Bashan. Now, they'll try to tell you it's Zion. It's not Zion. You watch. Verse 16. Why leap ye high hills? This is the hill which God desireth to dwell in. Yea, the Lord will dwell in it forever. Now, they go into the commentary on these two verses, and they'll tell you it's talking about Zion. How do you get Zion out of Bashan? And what is Bashan? All right, so we're going to try to figure out what's Bashan. The chariots of God are 20,000, even thousands of angels. The Lord is among them, as in Sinai, in the holy place. Where is Sinai? Isn't that Jerusalem? Well, no. Yeah. Galatians 4. What does it say? For this Agar is Mount Sinai in Arabia. Okay, it's in Arabia, but it answereth to Jerusalem, which now is and is in bondage with her children. But Jerusalem, which is above, is free and is the mother of us all. You see? So, for it is written, rejoice thou barren that bearest not, break forth and cry, thou that travailest not, for the desolate has many more children than she which who has a husband. So it was the host, it says, got handed over to the harlot spirit, whom man exalted in his heart. And then you see the Shulamite, who is black, keeping his vineyard for him. And the restrainer, in another aspect, or another rendition of that same verse, renders it as if the host actually became restrained, that wanted to come in on behalf of the righteous daughters, but they were restrained and held back. And so she's the mother of us all. But current day Jerusalem is answering to the law that came from Mount Sinai, which they tried to say came from God. You see what we're saying here? And so she comes from Sinai. And after she watches the children changing their glory, the children of Israel, after Moses goes down and he witnesses the children of Israel changing their glory, which were identified as the daughters of Zion, who the Lord 136 worked through as her personal inheritance for her scepter in the way that she ruled. The first dominion will be restored back to the daughter of Zion. Yep, she promised it. When they go down, they've changed their glory into the image of a calf, a bull. Yeah, she says, you changed your glory into the image of that eats grass. That's what you did. And you know why they did it? So they could eat meat, write their own laws, and build themselves up. So, you know what she says? She says to her daughter Zion that her own personal spirit came upon. In Zechariah chapter 11, she says this to her. All right? And this is why the Lord is in Sinai here giving this law the second time. She says they won't receive my 10 commandments. Moses ends up dropping them, a sign that they were rejecting her covenant. But she says this in Zechariah chapter 11. I think I just barely mentioned it. Where am I here? I'm in Zechariah. So, Zechariah chapter 7 verse, was it 10 or 11? 11. 7:11 or 7:10? No, it's 11:7. I got that reversed. Sorry, I do that. You know this if you've been watching my videos. So verse 7 of Zechariah 11. And I will feed the flocks of slaughter, even you, O poor of the flock. So she's talking about the daughters and their children, their sons and their daughters, that were going to be slaughtered eventually. And I will feed the flock of slaughter, even you, O poor of the flock. And she says, with the spirit upon her of 136, this is the daughter Zion herself, she says, and I took unto me 2 staffs. The one I called beauty, which represented the Spirit of the Lord that was upon her. It wasn't actually representing herself. It was representing the Spirit and the beauty of that Spirit, of that covenant. I called beauty. I took 2 staffs. The one I called beauty and the other I called bands. My inheritance. That's who they were called. The poor of the flock that is mentioned here. They were her personal inheritance. That this congregation of women that you see in Psalm 68 published the word of the Lord, which was also the congregation that met in the north. And they gnashed upon her, told lies about her, brought false witnesses in the court of law to remove her out of the land so they could take control of the law and play God. And I will feed the flocks of slaughter, even you, O poor of the flock. And I took unto me 2 staves. The one I called Duty, the other I called Bends, and I fed the flock. Then she states, I cut off 3 shepherds. She was abhorred by them. They didn't want to teach what she was telling them to teach. Then said I will not feed you. I'm done feeding you. So you see the Lord on Mount Sinai saying the same thing. I'm done feeding you. I'll give you precisely what you want. You want to be ruled over by wicked laws, by mankind that will steal your rights from you and your riches from you, then there's nothing more I can do. I'm going to pull back. But her daughters, who were the poor of the flock, knew what it was about. All right? So she says, and I took my staff, even Beauty, and I cut it asunder. I broke it in front of them, that I might break my covenant. I'm done with you. And she says, and it was broken in that day. And so the poor of the flock that waited upon me knew that it was the word of the Lord. They knew it came from mother. They knew that. The daughters knew that this breaking of the covenant came from mother from above, whom they met with in the north. So that is why 136 is in Psalm 68, also in a sense lying as an ash heap, the spirit there. So she says, fine. What did she say here? She says, give them the wicked devices of a foolish shepherd. She says, give them the foolish shepherds that's got wicked notions, and even the drunk that can prophesy foolishness will be the prophet of this people. Let them have what they want. So she gives them exactly what they want. So that's why the Lord here in Psalm 68 is seen coming from Sinai. She's the same Lord that breaks her covenant with them and says, hey, let them have all the foolish thoughts they want. Let them have the wicked devices of a foolish shepherd. Let them write religious lies and laws. Let them have it. But in the end, it's going to come around and they're going to be ensnared into their own lies. And I won't deliver them. So the clean pathway belonged to her. Long time have I holden my peace. Long time have I been restrained. Now will I go forth. I will destroy and I will devour. But I will lead them in paths, the way that they have not known. Right? So we see the same Lord. Actually in Zechariah chapter 11. In a very different manner, showing the breaking of her covenant versus her coming from Sinai in Psalm 68, which is then shown as Hagar with the children under the bondage of the law that came from Sinai, then identified as Jerusalem. Or certainly the law that feeds out from Jerusalem, which is the bondage that put the whole world under a man-made religious law and law. That's what it's showing you, which is why this Lord is seen coming from Sinai in Psalm 68. Okay. So, Psalm 68. So the chariots of God are even 20,000s, even thousands of angels. The Lord is among them. As in Sinai in the holy place. Yeah. So, as in Sinai in the holy place. So the Lord is among them in the sanctuary as she was at Sinai. That's a better rendering, I think. More truthful. Because certainly her sanctuary was not in Sinai. That was in the wanderings, right? And then God came upon that mountain and met with Moses and gave them the 10 Commandments the first time. And then Moses goes down and sees what they're doing. They're changing their glory, which were the daughters of Israel, the daughters of Zion, into the image of a calf. So they were changing the glory into an image that over time would play into their religious lies and laws. As man, 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 as God, 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 or male, one male, as God. The image of a male, which is a male, a man, right? That's your image. So the Lord is among them in the sanctuary as she was at Sinai. So they were rejecting her covenant by making a religious idol that was a lie of a calf. And so then you come into play the religious law of you must sacrifice a bullock and give to God a blood offering. She said, I ask no blood offering of you. But when they took away her righteous daughters, it says her daily grain offering, once you understand what the daily sacrifice is referring to in the book of Daniel, when the host got handed over from the commander, which is Lord, 136, and got handed over to a harlot spirit that had exalted herself to be equal with her, whether that be a male or a female, I'm not 100% sure of. At times it reads as if it was a male, and at other times as if it was a genuine harlot that did. But we know he exalted that harlot so that he could write his law, so that he could write his religious law. Anyway, the host, it says, either gets handed over to the harlot or her host gets restrained. And it may be part and parcel of both, all right? Because we see the angels falling. So we know that there's a lot at play here. There's a lot going on. And it says the daily sacrifice was removed. When you understand what the sacrifice is, yeah, I wrote it down. It's found in Joel 1 and 9, and it is not a blood offering. It is not. Joel 1:9, grain offerings and drink offerings, but not of blood. It was a water libation, I believe, are cut off from the house of the Lord. And those are the same daily sacrifices in Daniel 7:18 that could no longer be offered in her temple because they tore down the house in the forest of Lebanon. Or it gets removed off of earth when the spirit leaves. That's the other thing here. And what you see here in 17, in Psalm 68, the chariots of God, it really puts me in mind of the Ancient of Days when you see her arriving in the book of Daniel and the lightning that shoots out from her throne. It's really chariots. It's angels shooting out from her throne. And the Ancient of Days is just another way of saying wisdom. Ancient. Gray hairs. They try to put it he. No, it's she. Wisdom. She. Ancient of Days. That's who that is. And she, the Lord, was the commander of the hosts here on earth, is what she was. And her inheritance was the daughters of Zion that she worked through. And she's seen breaking that covenant. And then she is seen lying lying in the ash heaps, which is then a larger picture of these daughters of Zion as the heifer of Israel burned to ashes, which then is going to be rebirthed out of the dust of the earth. You see them speaking out of the dust of the earth, the covenant of the original covenant, all right, that man cast down did not want. So blessed be the Lord who daily loadeth us with benefits. May the Lord be praised. Day after day, she bears our burdens. And she does. It is woman who is yoked with these burdens. You could say, no, she ain't. Yes, she is. And what does it say? In Zephaniah. Okay, so that's Zephaniah. What does it say? I gather them that are sorrowful for the solemn assembly, who are of thee, to whom the reproach of it was a what? A burden. May the Lord be praised day after day. She bears our burdens. She does. Even the God of our salvation. What's salvation? I don't know what it is here. Sometimes they like to play with the word. 3444, female Yeshua. That's what it is. And she is the one that is daily bearing the burden of being blamed. But she's also the one that's going to deliver you. So, yeah, the chariots of God is, the Lord is among them as in Sinai, in the sanctuary as she was at Sinai. So she's in her own sanctuary. Well, where is her own sanctuary? Well, we just looked at where her sanctuary was on Mount Bashan. That was the mountain of God that she chose. In some translations, it will put it many peaked. But if you go in and look up how many peaks Mount Everest had, I believe it has like 18 peaks, Mount Everest alone. So when it says many peaked, people wants to translate that as many different mountains. No, it had many peaks. It was a many-peaked mountain. And it looks like it was one of the lower elevated ones, because God tends to like to dwell in the lower places of the earth. That tends to be where God dwells, though God is Lord of all. Thou hast ascended on high. Thou hast led captivity captive. Thou hast received gifts for men. Actually for people, women and men. Yea, for the rebellious, because God is no respecter of person. For the rebellious also, that the Lord God might dwell among them, that she might be amongst them, the presence of God among them. Blessed be the Lord, who daily loadeth us with benefits. Even the God of our salvation. Is because of her that you are blessed. She that is our God is a God of salvation. Unto the God, the Lord, belongs the issue from death. Who is promised? Romans 11. What does it say? Getting to be a long video, isn't it? Romans 11. For if the casting away of them be the reconciling of the world, what shall the receiving of them be but life from the dead? Who's that? The daughters of Zion, the remnant of Israel that were cast off. So who belongs escape from death? To who does it belong to? The daughter of Zion, 136. That's the Spirit Lord. That'll strike through kings in the day of her wrath for rejecting the spirit of her covenant and building up a harlot spirit that would bow to him as God in a religious lie. 21, but God shall wound the head of her enemies, and the hairy scalp is such as one as goeth on still in his trespasses or hers. The Lord says, watch this. This is going to lead us smoothly into Psalm 69. So write this down as something to be remembered. Right? The Lord said, I will bring again from Bashan, or I will bring them back from Bashan. I will bring them back from the depths of the sea. So, okay, so Bashan is at the bottom of the sea? There's an interesting thought. Bashan is at the bottom of the sea. Oh. Okay. That thy foot may be dipped in the blood of thine enemies, and the tongue of your dogs in the same, while the tongue of your dogs have their share. Okay. They have seen thy goings, O God, even the goings of my God, my queen, not king, in the sanctuary, or we could say my Lord in the sanctuary. The singers went before, the players on instruments followed after. Among them were the damsels playing timbrels. Now, that I could go on with the lyre thought, and I wrote that down at some point. I had thought I could do it, but I don't know. Like I said, it gets to be difficult to keep going. Bless ye God in the congregation, even the Lord from where? The fountain of Israel. Where was the fountain of Israel? Well, we get a fountain in Song of Songs 4:12. thy wife, the spouse of thy covenant. How is it read? I can't even remember. See, I am tired. Song of Songs 4:12. What does it say? You think I'd remember, but I'm tired. It says, a garden enclosed is my sister, my spouse, a spring shut up, a fountain sealed. Bless ye God in the congregation, even the Lord. Her number's 136 here. You're not getting 113 out of 110 there. And they're three separate, distinct lords identified in Genesis. I believe it's 18 or 21. And it's the same three numbers. So it's a distinct Lord here in view. It is the Spirit. It is the Holy One of Israel. It is the daughter Zion. Bless ye God in the congregations of the north. Even the Lord from the fountain of Israel. A garden enclosed is my sister, my spouse, a spring shut up, a fountain sealed. And then what does it say in verse 15? A fountain of garden, a well of living waters and streams from where? Lebanon. Oh, doesn't that take us to the north? Perhaps Bashan, Mount Bashan? Maybe? Yeah, maybe. Okay. So, a fountain of Israel, even the Lord, from the fountain of Israel. So I'm going to say she was somewhere in the vicinity of Lebanon, as in the house in the forest of Lebanon. There is little Benjamin with their ruler, not princess, I think it's the feminine, of Judah, and their council, also of Zebulun, also of Naphtali. These are all female. The God hath commanded thy strength, strengthen, O God, that which thou hast wrought for us. Because of thy temple at Jerusalem shall kings bring presents unto thee. At Jerusalem? Well, isn't that the same one in Galatians 4? Parallel. Is it the same one? Yeah. But it says, these things are an allegory, for these are the two covenants, the one from Mount Sinai, which gendereth to bondage, which is Hagar. For this Hagar is Mount Sinai in Arabia, and answereth to Jerusalem, which now is and is in bondage with her children. But the Jerusalem which is above, that means to ascend somewhere, is free. And she is the mother of us all. So, what is it talking about here? Because of thy temple at Jerusalem. Now, another name for Jerusalem is Zion, correct? All right. This is where it's going to get a little complicated for our understanding. Which Zion? The Zion, Jerusalem, that is putting Hagar in bondage under religious lies and laws that fed out into the whole lands. It says all lands, polluted them. Or are we talking about the Jerusalem from above? Is that the one we're talking about? Because I'm going to tell you, I think that's the one we're talking about. We're not talking about the one here that's putting us under the bondage of a man-made religious lie and law that fed out to the four corners of the world. Why do I say that? Okay, let's just remember that, okay? I don't know how you'd write it down, but let's remember it. Okay, rebuke the company of spearmen, the multitude of the bulls. Oh, what bulls? The bulls of Bashan that compass me, that encircle me, that reject me, that pierce me, that gnash at me with their teeth and their lies, that shoot at me with their bows. That's their lying covenant. With their arrows and their bows. That's their lies. And their sword. So with the calves of the people, till everyone submit himself to being bought off. Underfoot the pieces of silver. He has scattered the peoples who delight in war. Okay, the herd of bulls with the calves of the people, trampling underfoot the pieces of silver. He delighted to scatter the people who delight in war. Actually, she delighted in scattering them. Envoys will come out of Egypt. Ethiopia will quickly stretch out her hands to God. Sing to God, O kingdoms of the world, or earth. Sing praises to the Lord. 136. To her who rides upon the highest heavens. The highest heavens. And Mother Jerusalem is from above. She is the mother of us all, which are from ancient times. Behold, she speaks forth with her voice, a mighty voice. Ascribe strength to God. Her majesty is over Israel, and her strength is in the skies. Oh, look, I think we're getting a better idea of what Jerusalem we're talking about. Oh God, you are awesome from your sanctuary. The God of Israel, herself, not himself, gives strength and power to the people. Blessed be God. Okay, now, we're going to move on to Psalm 69, possibly. And I'm going to see how long this video is getting to be. Woo! I doubt I got time to do it. I really do. But maybe if I do it quick. Okay, so the idea with Zion, all right, if I can get this pulled up. This is where we need to go to understand a few things. So I'm going to go through this fast. And I apologize for it taking so long. So let's go to Deuteronomy 3:9. Where is it? I got so many pulled up here. So Deuteronomy 3:9. I'm obviously not going to get to reading Job 30. Deuteronomy 3:9. At that time we took from the two kings of the Amorites the land across the Jordan, from the Arnon Valley as far as Mount Hermon. Mount Hermon, remember that. Which the Sidonians call Syrian, but the Amorites call Sinir. All the cities of the plateau, all of Gilead, and all of Bashan as far as the cities of Selikah and Edrei in the kingdom of Og. So this Bashan was largely a name for what the king of Og was his territory called, Bashan. It was not in Judah. It was not located anywhere in Judah that I can understand. Now you can ask 100 different questions and they simply don't want to give you simple, straightforward answers anymore like you could get 5 years ago. They want to complicate it and dance all around it. But the area that the king of Bashan ruled or the king of Og ruled over was Bashan. And Bashan is described as having this little Mount Hermon inside of it. All right? That's why we're to pay attention to this. Now, if we go to Deuteronomy, okay, now if I can find it, 4:48, this is what it says. All right? So this is something that you can focus on. So we'll begin in Deuteronomy 4. Why ain't my computer working? It's brand new. They took possession of the land belonging to Sihon and to Og, king of Bashan, the two Amorite kings across the Jordan to the east, extending from Aroer, I can't say it, or Aroer, on the rim of the Arnon Valley as far as Mount Sihon, that is Hermon. All right, so let's look at a better translation. From Aroer, which is by the bank of the river Arnon, even unto Mount Sihon, which is Hermon. Do we understand what was just said here? This Mount Sihon, which is in Hermon, which they called it Mount Hermon. This is what they referred to it as. But it was Mount Sihon, was in the land of Bashan, that was in the territory of King Og, that they slayed and took his land. It was not in the territory of Judah. Now, One more thing that you can go look at, okay? Psalm 133, verse 3. It is as if the dew of Hermon were falling on Mount Zion. I thought they just identified Mount Hermon as Mount Zion. But where's the dew falling from? It is as if the dew of Mount Hermon, I'm going to stick Mount in there because that's what it was called, Mount Hermon, were falling on Mount Zion. For there the Lord bestows her blessings, even life forevermore. So the Mount Zion, Jerusalem from above, bestowed her blessing upon the Mount Hermon below, which was also called Mount Zion, which was in the territory of Bashan, according to this. You see why it gets to be confusing until then you understand why Galatians 4 is so important that it factors in. Because it's telling you that their religious lie came from Mount Sinai after they rejected the Ten Commandments for the religious lie that had been brought in by the surrounding Adamic nations through the harlots known as the serpents that were biting the men because they were receiving the lying theology. And God says, fine, Moses, make a brass serpent. This is the seraphim. Raised on a scepter. That's your rulers. That's what it's identifying, your branches. That comes from the original roots of Israel as your rulers. And she says, any man that'll look that has been bitten by these serpents that Balaam told Balak to go get. That's why they begin to prophesy in Baal and themselves husbands and begin to teach your father as God. That's why they did it. The poisoning began in the Exodus. And she says in Ezekiel, and I forget which chapter it is, seems like it's 13. I may be wrong. But she says, it even followed the children into the physical land of Israel. They're rejecting of me. And I was going to deal with them, but I decided not to do so, lest the enemy thought it was them. So, you see, we have many questions that is not adding up and some that are adding up quite well. Now, I'm just a dummy. I'm not anything bright. But I think truth ought to matter enough for me to care enough to go in and study it. And I think there's those out there who are like-minded, who are confused with current-day theology that teaches a father and his children and completely ignores the mother aspect. There is something seriously wrong with your doctrine, boys. And if you don't want to be accused as being one of these foxes that are destroying the vineyard that's in bloom, then maybe you ought to go in and get down on your knees with the Holy Spirit, the Holy One of Israel, and start studying the scriptures through the eyes of the Spirit instead of reading man-made commentary. That's what I suggest. So we're going to read in Psalm 69. We're going to skim it real quick. But we're going to show you what happened to Mount Bashan on earth. The real Mount Bashan on earth. It tells you all of it in Psalm 69 if you have eyes to see with and ears to hear with. For the director of music to the tune of the lilies. Oh my, there's the lilies of the covenant again. Look at that. Save me, O God, for the waters have come up to where? To my neck. Yep. I sink in the miry depths where there is no foothold. I have come into the deep waters, and the floods engulf me. They want to cover me with their religious lies and laws, their waters. I am worn out calling for help. My throat is parched. My eyes fail looking for my God. So they got stranded on earth. The glory got cast down to earth, right? And the harlot host gets handed over not to the daughter of Zion, but to the harlot spirit that would hearken to a religious lie. and bow to man as God. And so they become this outcast present, a double camp, the camp of God, Mahanaim, the presence of the Lord on earth, the outcast Zion, that no man sought a covenant with. And eventually it looks like, in some context, and I may be out of line on this, this is just a brief thought I hit when I read a couple of verses, so don't hang your hat on it, that it looks like that they pursued them at some point, and they took them out of the land, and literally, eventually, over time, burned this camp to ashes, is what they did. They found this double camp, Mahanaim, who the gateway of God had been shut off to them. They got stranded on earth, the glory, though it is promised the descendancy is herself again. Now, it's not something that we can fully comprehend, but it is there. It's a spiritual aspect that we don't fully comprehend. But it does look like they were surrounded, right? Just pierced me, gnashed at me, and eventually they burned this camp to ashes, is what it looks like. And that is why she lies like a dove amongst the ash heaps. That's kind of your understanding there. And they were the presence of God upon this earth. No man sought a covenant with them. They were a separated camp. They became strangers to their mother's children. And they were trapped in a sense. But it was all in God's plan of redemption. So I am worn out calling for help. My throat is parched. My eyes fail looking for my God. Those who hate me without reason outnumber the hairs of my head, and many are my enemies without cause. And those who seek to destroy me, I am forced to restore what I did not steal. So she's saying at the end, she's saying, I must restore the children back. No man can birth these children out through the straight pathway. It is the restrainer that is no longer going to be restrained. You, God, know my folly. My guilt is not hidden from you. Lord, yeah, that's who it is. Lord, the Lord Almighty, may those who hope in you not be disgraced because of me. God of Israel, may those who seek you not be put to shame because of me. For I endure scorn for your sake, and shame covers my face. I am a foreigner to my own family, Israel, a stranger to my own mother's children. For the zeal for your house, the house in the forest of Lebanon, the temple in Bashan, consumes me, and the insult of those who insult you fall on me. The reproach, the burden that they carry on them has fallen on them. When I weep and fast, I must endure scorn. And when I put on sackcloth, people make sport of me. Those who sit in the gate talk about me, and I am the song of the drunkards. Who became the byword? Israel. The daughters of Israel. And they rejoiced to think they had took the spirit of her covenant out of the land. And they got drunk on it. They got drunk on their own lies and on their own doctrine. And you see them actually throwing up on the tables these drunkards who cast their own crown to the ground. Ephraim did that. That was your ruler. Your crown identified you as a king by what you ruled by. So they cast their own scepter to the ground. They didn't honor. That was eternal life, by the way. And you find them in Isaiah. It's either Isaiah 28 or 29. You see them being drunk and throwing up on the tables. And it's talking about a lying theology. And so she becomes the byword. But I pray to you, Lord, in the time of your favor and in great love, O God, answer me with your sure salvation. Rescue me from the mire. Do not let me sink. Deliver me from those who hate me and from the deep waters. Where did the Bashan go? She got covered over with water. That's why she's bringing her back up from Bashan. It actually looks like the water levels rose and came over this Mount Bashan, which would have been one of the lower mounts, actually, We think of God on being the highest, but God tended to like to dwell on the lower hills. That's where God tended to like to rule from. And it looks like, just by reading these two chapters, that the Hell of Bashan may well have been a low, under sea level, right? That's almost what it looks like. So those who sit at the gate mock me, and I am the song of the drunkards. But I pray to you, Lord, in the time of your favor, in your great love, O God, answer me with your sure salvation. She says, I'll bring up Bashan from the depths. Rescue me from the mar. Do not let me sink. Deliver from those who hate me and from the deep waters. So there does seem to be some idea that she is going to drain the waters. The water levels of earth is actually going to go down in some understanding. I'm just starting to get it in, I believe it's in one of the passages in Isaiah. Now, if I can quickly find it, I'll share it with you. I did mark it. Let me see. Give me a second here. It was in the 60s, I believe. Okay, I'm in 54, 56. Okay, I still think it's in the 60s. I marked it. But it has the idea of the water levels falling. And that idea is kind of gave also in the restrainer no longer being restrained in Isaiah 42. She says, I will dry up the herbs, I will dry up the pools. Okay, so it's not. I thought it was one of the 60s. Excuse me, I am tired tonight. Okay, I'm sorry, I can't find it, but I thought it was in the 60s of Isaiah somewhere, and it's a passage of it has the idea of the draining of an ocean. So here she says the waters have come up. You know, it has the idea that come up over Mount Bashan, where Mount Hermon, Mount Zion, which is the mother of us all from above, it's there. The idea is there. Oh, draw near to my soul and redeem it. Ransom me from my enemies. You know my reproach and my shame and my dishonor. All my adversaries are before you. Reproach has broken my heart, and I am so sick. And I looked for sympathy, but there was none. And for comforters, but I found none. They also gave me gall for my food, and for my thirst they gave me vinegar to drink. So again, you're kind of looking at bitter waters is what you're looking at, which is part of their lies. It's always been part of their lies. May their table before them become a snare. We see that table set actually in Proverbs chapter 9, verse 1. Wisdom has set her table. She's laid a snare. And when they are in peace, may it become a trap for them. So that's when they say, peace. Peace. We're going to be delivered. Just have faith that a male God, is going to come and deliver the children. Just, you don't need to go in and study. And yet it says study is what's going to bring on the day of the Lord. It doesn't say reading. It says study to show yourself approved unto God. And it is study, I believe it's in 2 Peter, I think, that will bring on the day of the Lord, not faith. Study, it says. Let their eyes be darkened that they may not see, and make their loins continually to shake. Pour out thine indignation, thy wrath, The Lord that sits to the right hand in Psalm 110. She will strike through kings in the day of her wrath. Pour out thine indignation upon them, and let thy wrathful anger take hold of them. Let their habitation be desolate, and let none dwell in their tents. For they persecute her whom thou hast smitten, and they talk to the grief of those whom thou hast wounded. So this was permitted to go forth. We're told again why. To reconcile the nations back. She was burned to ashes. And ashes is what cleanses the temple, representing the body. So add iniquity unto their iniquity, and let them not come into thy righteousness. Let them be blotted out of the book of the living. This is in Psalm 69. And not be written with the righteous. But I am poor and sorrowful, and let thy salvation, O God, set me up on high. I'll praise the name of God with a song, and will magnify her with thanksgiving. That's the doe of the morning. 108, Psalm 108, the lyre. She says, I will awaken the dawn. And the Lord that awakens is 136. That's her number. I will praise the name of God with a song. All right, this also shall please the Lord better than an ox or a bullock that has horns and hooves. She says, I was never pleased with a blood offering. It was always a thanksgiving offering that pleased me the most. And that you would hearken to my laws and love one another as you would love me, your God. That was always what I asked of you. I never asked blood. Never. The humble shall see this and be glad, and your heart shall live that seek God, for the Lord heareth the poor and despises not her prisoners. Whose prisoners? The captives. Who's the captives? Under a religious law and law. We discussed it. Let the heavens and earth praise her, the seas and everything that moveth therein. For God will save Zion, and she will build the cities of Judah, that they may dwell there and have them in possession. The seed also of her servants, the descendants of her servant. Who was identified as her servant? Isaiah 40, 41, 42 tells you Israel is her servant upon this earth. It's referring to the daughters of Israel, the daughters of Zion, whom man rejected as the spirit of his covenant, choosing to make a harlot the spirit of his covenant so he could write his religious lies and laws and rule. So the descendants of her servants will inherit it, and those who love her name will live in it. Look at that. So, let's see. Are we a sucker for punishment? Do I have anything flying around in the air? See, I haven't been able to watch my video. I know I seen one at the start. I have nothing flying around in this room. I'm like, what are they? Some of them looks like feathers almost. What are they? It's just so I'm sorry. I ain't got time to talk about that. It's 1:43. Let's see if we can bolt through this one in 15 minutes. So, we want it to. This is a wonderful chapter. It's going to clue you into who is talking. She says, I go about blackened, but not by the sun. So she's talking about her spirit being blackened. The religious lie. So she's been blackened, but not by the sun. I stand up in the assembly and cry for help. So at this time, the assembly becomes male. Correct? Yeah, it becomes male because they were no longer listening to their sister, who was this congregation of women identified in Psalm 68 who published the word of the Lord. All right, so we've just been through the whole thing. But watch this. I love the NIV. It really shows you it's the feminine that's talking. But now they mock me, Israel, daughter Zion. Men younger than I, whose fathers I would have disdained to put with my sheepdogs. Of what use was the strength of their hands to me, since their vigor had gone from them? Haggard from want and hunger, they roamed the parched land and desolate wastelands at night. Now, these looks like the men who were the surrounding Adams, I guess, who did not want to partake of the covenant. They weren't fit to partake of the covenant. Now, I believe in one video identified it as the women that were cast out, but they don't come until after this first part. So in the brush they gathered salt, herbs, and their food was the root of the broom bush. They were banished from human society, shouted at as if they were thieves. They were forced to live in the dry stream beds among the rocks and in the holes and in the ground, and they brayed among the bushes and huddled in the undergrowth. A base and nameless brood, they were driven out of the land. And now those young men mock me in song. All right, so the position reverses. I have become a byword among them. Who? This presence of God, identified as a double camp, that no man sought a covenant with. They detest me and keep their distance. They do not hesitate to spit in my face. Now that God has unstrung my bow, sorry, I've been talking too much, and afflicted me. So what bow? Her covenant, which you see the women running over the wall because the men rejected their covenant, yet did her bow, her covenant, remain strong and was made strong by the hand of the Almighty God of Israel. You also get in Proverbs 7, is it Proverbs 7 or Psalm 7, that she has restrung her bow, her covenant. Now that God has unstrung my bow and afflicted me, they throw off restraint in my presence. On my right, the tribes attack. They lay snares for my feet. They build their siege ramps against me. Where were they building siege ramps against her? Isaiah 29. They laid a siege against Ariel, the lioness of God. Which you also see further understanding of what they were doing to the rulers of Israel in Ezekiel 19. They break up my road. So she had a straight footpath. They succeed in destroying me, and no one can help her. It's not him. No one can help her, they say. They advance as through a gaping breach amid the ruins. They come rolling in. Terrors overwhelm me. My dignity is driven away as by the wind. My safety vanishes like a cloud. We're no longer safe under these religious lies and laws, are we? No longer safe. They want to attack us, that's all they think about doing, is gnashing at us with their lies. And now my life ebbs away. Days of suffering grip me. Night pierces my bones. My gnawing pains never leave. I never rest. In her great power, God becomes like clothing to me. No. By the great force, this is the correct rendering, of my disease, the disease is sin, the lie, the religious lie, is my garment changed. So her body changes. She becomes weakened under the religious lie. What does it say? Adam built himself up with thick clay under the religious lies and laws that makes him rich and empowers him. She becomes debased and weakened under his man-made religious lies and laws. By the great force of my disease is my garment changed. It bindeth me about as the collar of my coat. He has cast me into the mire. Are we getting it yet? And I am become like dust and ashes. I cry unto thee, but you do not hear me. And I stand up in the assembly, and you don't even regard me, she's saying to the men, to her partner that she lamented about in Psalm 55. Oh, that I had the wings of a dove. No such thing as the divine feminine. No. I cry unto thee, but you don't hear me. Thou art become cruel to me with your strong hand. You opposest thyself against me now. For I know that thou wilt bring me to death into the house appointed for all living. Howbeit, he will not stretch out his hand to the grave, though they cry in her destruction. So I'm not sure what that's rendered. Yet does not one in a heap of ruin stretch out his hand, or in his disaster therefore cry out for help. Her, Yet does not one in a heap of ruin stretch out her hand, or in her disaster, therefore. It could be him or her. I'm tired, I'm sorry. Did not I weep for him that was in trouble? Was not my soul grieved for the poor? When I looked for good, then evil came unto me, and when I waited for light, there came darkness. My bowels boiled and rested not, the days of affliction prevented me. I went mourning without the sun. I stood up and I cried in the congregation. I am a sister to the dragons, and a companion to owls. What they became to me, and a companion of ostriches, it says. My skin is black upon me. Whose skin was black? The Shulamite. Look not upon me, because the sun has looked upon me. My mother's sons were angry with me. They made me the keeper of the vineyard, but my own I have neglected. She says, look not upon me. I am black. My mother's sons were angry with me. They made me the keeper of the vineyard. Here she says, my skin is black upon me, and my bones are burned with heat. My harp, my lyre is turned to mourning, and my pipe to the sound of wailing. Who is wailing? For their houses being torn down and being cast out of the land. The daughters of Zion in Jeremiah 9. And who had the lyre? Watch. I'm just about done. Long video, sorry. Right here. Psalm 108. The same word for lyre here in Psalm 108. Awake, harp, and lyre. I will awaken the dawn. What? Psalm 22. What does it say? For the director of music to the tune of the doe of the morning, or the doe of the dawn. I will awaken the dawn. Who has the lyre? And who has the black skin? Or, she says, but not, how does she say it? Job 30. My lyre is turned to mourning, and my pipe to the sound of wailing. It's she. This is she. This is all in regards to the divine female. This is not a male. This is what they did to their sister. They gnashed at her to take the spirit of her covenant out of the land. So what did she say? She says, I'm black, but not because of... what did it say? They mar my path, they come upon me. Yeah. Well, where did it say it? Oh, I'm sorry. I just want to be done now. Yeah. I go about blackened, but not by the sun. But then she says in Song of Songs 1:6, look not upon me because I am black. My mother's sons were angry with me. They made me the keeper of the vineyard. 1:6. Yeah, just look not upon me because I am black. So she says, I go about blackened, but not by the sun. I stand up in the assembly and cry for help. So she must be talking about mourning at this point. So I go about mourning. Yeah, that's the King James. I went mourning, right? Without the sun, without comfort. Yeah, without comfort. I stand up in the assembly and cry out for help. So she's talking about the night here is almost what it looks like. She came into darkness, a time of darkness. That's what that's saying. I go about in the darkness, mourning, but not by the sun, because I'm not in the sun. I stand up in the assembly and I cry for help. I have become a sister of jackals and a companion of ostriches. My skin grows black and peels. My body burns with fever. My lyre is turned to mourning, and my pipe to the sound of wailing. So, I mean, anybody who wants to study these passages and links it, there's no way you're going to put a he as the Godhead. Nope. Don't care what you say. All you got to do is study. And I know it's hard when you don't have the time. It really is. But when somebody reads these passages right to you, and you keep right on, keeping on that crooked path, then I think you kind of deserve what you get. I mean, if common sense doesn't tell you male and female is the Godhead, with the female representing the Spirit as the life giver, which is identified in all of these passages, then I guess you are in deep trouble for not getting sense and reasoning. God says, come, let us reason together. But hey, go to Baal's commentary. That makes more sense. A father and his children. But my own vineyard have I not kept, she says. Better start keeping it. So, thanks for watching. I hope y'all have a good evening. It's getting on along here. And I think for anybody, I think anybody who's watching my videos, I still do hope to put out a part 7. I think. Don't hold me to it. It may be a long time in coming. May shock you when it finally does get posted. But I feel that the Lord is trying to show me something extra on the house in the forest of the Lebanon. And when that comes in, I'll post that part 7 maybe on unlocking the mysteries of the Bible with the key of David. So that's the video. I know it's long. Thanks for watching. I pray the Lord blesses you all with an abundance of truth. And I hope y'all have a nice evening. Thanks.